Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming to this session. I hope you enjoyed the keynote. He stole part of my show, but it's all right. My name is Joel Reyes, and I am a technology evangelist for Microsoft. I've been involved with public sector for about 10 years now. I was an evangelist, working primarily with state and local government. I used to come here every year to deliver technical conferences on the other part of town over there, across from the governor's office, so to speak. So today we are going to explore the challenge that was presented to us. It was in the form of a question: is Windows 8 ready for prime time, and does it have a place in mobile strategy? So in the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to explore Windows 8 from the point of view of 4 aspects of it that I think will be consistent with being ready for prime time and being part of the mobile strategy. You just came out of the keynote, so there was Joel touched on some of these. It's pretty much a fact of reality that citizens expect access to services from anywhere, anytime. That from an enterprise point of view, employees want to bring their own devices to work. And this notion of this dynamic nature of things being always connected, this assumption that because the city of Sacramento is located here, doesn't preclude a citizen being on vacation in Honolulu from needing to interact with systems and services, maybe to pay some taxes because it's expired next day or whatnot. So there's no longer this assumption that because citizens live in a given city that they are actually always local. They actually could be anywhere. So there's also the notion of, of professionals. We have the responsibility within the ones that are involved with IT to, not only enable citizens to get access to that information and those services, but also ourselves being able to do it in a more disconnected way. By that I mean work remotely, et cetera, et cetera. So Joel spoke about the trends and some of the characteristics of the industry moving forward. The fact that about 80% of current workers spend some amount of time working remotely, for instance, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to dive into the specifics about some of those numbers in terms of trends, but instead I want to jump into the 4 areas that I want to focus on today. We want to talk about Windows 8 and Windows Phone, as a matter of fact, from the point of view of consistency of experience. Talk about the opportunity for applications. Traditionally, in state and local government, we think applications from the point of view of line of business apps, but I would like to articulate, other opportunities there. Talk about productivity from the point of view of the back office aspect of it, being always connected at work or away from work. And also, it's important that all that stuff that's happening has a centralized way of managing and controlling it and enforcing policies and so on. The key message here is that from the point of view of mobility, both Windows and phone have this shared core of capabilities from a point of view of functionality as well as security, et cetera. So speaking specifically of this notion of better together and increasing user experience by connecting things in a more fluent way, this particular university decided that they wanted to enable students to have the same experience, but also being able to do it in such a way that the IT department didn't lose control over management of those devices. So they decided to give their students a Windows 8 device, a Samsung Series 7 tablet, for instance, as well as a Windows Phone device, and be able to, leverage the cloud for connecting those devices, but also to connect all the different colleges that are part of the school, and allow IT to continue to have control over those devices and increase the experience for the students. So that's one example of how a large organization entrusted Windows 8 and the Windows mobile technology family, if you will, at a large scale. So again, moving forward towards this notion of cross experience, it's good to be able to have an experience that is consistent across both a device like the phone, as well as kind of a slate device that can take many shapes, as you'll see down the road. So you can see here through the animation that I have notification services coming through this tile system on my device, but also if I switch over to my slate device, I preserve that experience. Let me see if I can do the animation with the error here. Okay. I have to turn copy the presentation over to this machine, so trying to familiarize with the setting here. But you can see that the tile system allows me to have consistent experience. So I could receive the news on the device or on a mobile device or my slate. I use this, my son and I play chess online all the time. So sometimes I'm on Netflix watching a movie, so whenever he makes a move, a little notification shows up there so I can pull the phone and go make my move. So that level of connected experience is important and for consumers. And more, the newer generation is even more demanding about those kinds of experiences. Here's an example where Wall Street basically has a companion, we call it a companion device or application. So if you're on the move, with your device, you can stay on touch with the news, but when you switch over to a slate device, then you preserve the same kind of immersive experience, but in a more enhanced way, because you get, to take advantage, the application will take advantage that will stay available and give you more information and so on. But the actual backend systems and the connectivity is the same, and the experience is preserved or enhanced, depends on in the situation that you're in, right? If you're running, you're not going to be carrying your slate. You have your phone, but when you're sitting at a park somewhere resting, it's better if you can, pull your sleigh and then continue to where you left off from there. So here's basically the key message here is that we have approached Windows Save in a way that doesn't compromise, the user experience, so that you don't have to give up certain things just because it's a slate device. So we preserve the ability for you to use a mouse or a keyboard, but we think in terms of touch first, so that if you don't have the mouse or keyboard, you still can interact with the device. But if you're sitting at a desk and you're producing instead of consuming information, it's better if you have access to those external peripherals, because the fact that we just got used to typing faster than if you do it on using touch, for instance. The preservation of productivity through Office and the line of business applications. So, again, we don't want to compromise that. Just because you adopted a new form factor doesn't mean now I have to have two devices, because I can't install this line of business app that's been around for 10 years. And also the idea of being able to continue to manage and control your environment, your infrastructure. Either having to acquire new technology to do it, right? Or not being able to do it at all. So Microsoft had done something phenomenal in the sense that it has taken stuff that already exists and derived new value from it. Okay? By that I mean, the operating system capabilities, the management tools, all of those things has been there. And if we talk about development, development for the technology, .NET has been there, right? So now we just bring it all together, providing new scenarios with touch first, etc. Another thing we've done that I think is very important is enable this ecosystem where other third party can, contribute innovation on the basis of our technology. So you can see here not an exhaustive, but a list of different types of devices provided by different manufacturers. And again, no one size fits all, right? So for one particular scenario, one device may be better than others, so you're not forced to have to, challenge your modus operandi, if you will, just because you have to adapt to one device that is inflexible because it's just one fits all model. So, there are criteria that may be important to each of you in terms of choosing a particular device. Maybe I just came across a wonderful device today that I wish I had purchased before I decided on this one. It's very thin, very light, and it's a beautiful device. So from that point of view, to me, weight will be a criteria, right? Battery life, for instance, etc. So the key here is that even to the point of the actual manufacturing on different form factors, we have preserved the ability for you to make choices so that they can apply to your particular scenario. So again, in terms of capability, what is important? Is it the workload? or is it the fact there's a mobile app? So you could have a WinRT if it's something where you are enabling new types of applications where the workload is not as critical. But if its workload is critical, then we also have the Intel-based machines where you can actually continue to preserve a backward compatibility with other apps, etc. Now, you couldn't talk about Windows 8, and we couldn't talk about mobility if we don't talk about the phone themselves as well. So again, same principle, the same user experience, but also the preservation of choice, so that different vendors can play in this ecosystem and have their own level of innovation. We've seen how Nokia has come up with amazing new capabilities in the Nokia 920, for instance. So that's important because Microsoft was built on this principle of of an ecosystem, not just one OS, one device, and one user experience. So for us, it's important to not only preserve that, but also those other entities have a role to play in innovation. So we make that part of the whole set of choices. So the key message again is this whole notion of choice and experience preserved across devices. So here you have kind of a sample. Here you have a device with a keyboard, with a stylus. You can detach the screen, but the actual experience is preserved throughout that. Again, you could just have a device that is just a slate device, and you can later on maybe attach those peripherals if the device supports that. There are applications where you need to have one or the other. In some cases, it may be that the keyboard may not be desirable. Like if you're a pilot and you have to have flight information, well, in that case, a slate device is more appropriate. So the keyboard and it may get on the way because there's not much room in the cockpit to do much with that. So that's the kind of thinking that Microsoft used going into designing the OS to support all the different choices and all the different scenarios. What about apps? Okay, so there are two things here. One is the internal applications, which is probably the thing that most state and local government agencies are interested in. But I think that if we think in terms of new opportunities, being able to think of citizens, of consumers, and extend this line of business application capability to the global or population of citizens is very important. And I think it represents a very unique opportunity for agencies, not only from the point of view of providing access to services, but think in terms of maybe even making a little extra money. There's no reason why a good application couldn't be a 99-cent app. It's not going to pay, it's not going to solve your budget problem, but it could at least augment the cost of the application and so on. So I think there is a financial model for this that in the future will become more relevant as citizens become more appreciative of having access to the government at whatever the level. They'll be more willing to pay a little money for the application depending on the scenario. Again, for the nature of the fact that data is publicly owned, et cetera, that may not be part of that, but the application itself, you could think of it in that way. I always argue that the developers that are best positioned to build contextual apps for government are not third party, are not students. It is the very developers that work at the agencies. They know the data, they know the contextual value of that data, they know where it resides, how to get to it. But again, I think we need to evangelize the notion that there is an opportunity for them to now take all that capability and make it publicly available through a store of some sort. And we are the only store in the industry that has a specific government category. If you go to the other competitors, they don't have a government category. So we created that both on the Windows Phone as well as Windows 8 to facilitate the notion of developers being able to publish their apps in a way that is clearly defined as targeting that particular industry. So when you go to the Windows Store, just search for the government category. You see a long list there. I have some of those here that I was going to demo, but I didn't realize that I had to use this machine, so may not be able to do it because of time. So what about the role that our development tool plays in this? This is very important because, given that we have new capabilities, what does that do to my tool set or my skill set, right? So again, we've been able to allow for Visual Studio to play a central role in this so that you can continue to use the skills you already know, continue to use the platform you already know, continue to use the investment on your own capabilities that you've developed over the years, so that whether you transform that into a web interface on the cloud or hosted it internally, you are still using the same tool set that you come to know. And specifically when it relates to Windows Store apps, we're talking about SAML, we're talking about C#, we're talking about .NET, HTML5, JavaScript, so there's nothing really new that you have to learn to be able to create these new experiences. We also have the notion of basically the support for multiple architectures, right? x86 and ARM particularly. Deployment model, again, if you're talking about deploying through the store, then we have a process for you to publish there. Otherwise, we have full support for you to be able to do this on your own through sideloading and using some of the enterprise management tools that you've come to know over the years. So you have this notion of a internal app portal that your users come to and can serve themselves for the applications. That's for apps that you either don't feel or don't think should be publicly available, at least for download. Because there are mechanisms by which you can actually publish the app, but only make it available to the users that you intend to. Likewise with the Windows 8. So the scenario doesn't change. You use Visual Studio to build apps for Windows Store as well as Windows Phone. In the same way. And we have created capabilities to allow you to optimize the code so that you could actually design the application so that it can both the Windows 8 app and Windows Phone app can depend on the same core set of capabilities. It's the same code that can run in both platforms. I'm not saying that you can write one app and without changing it run in both environments. Okay, I'm saying we have the capability to allow developers to build a core set of components that can actually be used on both at the same time, unchanged. But also you have to account for the UI and so on. So just want to make that clear because I don't want you walking out of here thinking that, oh, I can build one app and publish it and run it on both environments. That's not the case. You can optimize that through portability classes that we provide. So here's a summary of that in terms of deployment. For the enterprise, you have the choices of installing on the Windows Store. If it's something that is going to be intended, for citizens in general, that makes the most sense. Is the more optimized way to do it. So that's true for both stores. So we have two stores: the Windows Store and the Windows Phone Store. Or you can rely on your own portal, self-service portal that actually is tied to your management infrastructure. With iTunes, for instance, if you're supporting multiple devices, that will be relevant. We'll touch on that. So that your line of business applications that are Windows Store apps, just to make that clear, can then be deployed that way. So when we talk about internal line of business apps, we're talking about Windows Store apps. They just happen not to be published on the public store. So here's one scenario. So one app from the stores may have something specific to do with access to services that are of citizen concern, but then you have your hardcore business applications that you want to leverage a new set of user experience internally. So, it's been proven that the UI will definitely have an impact on productivity. So if you want to take some of these older applications and give it a new life, you can preserve the back-end implementation, just create a new experience on the client side through Windows 8 and provide for more immersive experience for your users. And you could be actually the case that you have a companion application that also resides on the store for the same purpose. And then you have to rely on specific authentication for the internal users through that external app. That's also another scenario that can be accounted for. This is some example of apps. I'm not going to dive into that because they're not government related. But we have a large number of applications already in the store out there, and more and more government types of apps are coming on board. every day. We don't track the internal line of business apps because we don't have a way of doing that, so we only rely on the external ones. But the same approach applies for both. Okay? The only difference is the deployment aspect of it. So what about cloud? What about productivity? So let's touch on productivity. So we cover the user experience, we cover the application model and the opportunities there. So let's touch on productivity. This is very important, and I think this is a key element of the mobility aspect of Windows 8. And like Joel said, you know, just mobility doesn't have to mean a phone. It means that you can actually do what you need to do at the point of need. So from that point of view, you see here Link, for instance. I have Link on my device. I also have Link on my larger, let's call it desktop, if you will. There are two versions of it, the desktop version, and there's also a Windows Store version. So in terms of staying connected, right? So I can read my mail, but I have the same information, you know, expressed in a different way given the form factor, so that I can have access to that information as well on my device. So I can see that this person is available because it has that little green line there, and I can initiate conversation with her through Link right from my device. If my Slate device is connected to Link also in the same session, then I can literally just put the phone down, pick up the Slate, and I can see the messages there as well. So there is continuity of experience. For line of business apps or enterprise type applications, again, the same thing. A couple things. One, notice that how the view of this Excel is preserved on my mobile device. And if you have formulas and things of that nature, it's also preserved on both. So this idea of being able to be productive on the go and be able to do it in such a way where it's natural, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to tweak the phone in any way to make this work. It just works. But it also gives enterprise management professionals the ability to control policies around some of those things. So you have communication in real time, the web management of calendar and email, the IRM for protection, so that if you have a document that you emailed, well, my mobile device understands this. It can actually open the document if I have already been, you know, provisioned with my enterprise IT to be able to do that. But if I were to grab another device and try to open the same document, and I'm not, you know, configured to be, you know, authenticated with the enterprise system, it's not going to allow me to do that, no matter what, even if I try from a different device. So, very important. Oh, by the way, on the device itself, it's not just consuming of data. That Excel, I can open it up and edit it. And if that document came from, you know, the cloud, from SharePoint or for some other place, it's going to automatically make the update. So I could actually open a PowerPoint document, I'm on the fly, make some changes, save it, and the people in the office can see the change immediately. Okay? So here's an example here. In this case, he's talking about the synchronization with the cloud. So we support two versions of the SkyDrive. This is more of a personal cloud type connectivity, because you also have the Azure cloud for implementing solutions. This is basically kind of the consumer version of that. So you have the SkyDrive, and we have SkyDrive Pro for enterprises. And here also you get to preserve the same user experience. So on the device, you have basically many different sources of document. Could be the local device, literally because I copied the device when I connected it. Could be that I store it on an SD card or just directly into the actual device hard drive. It could be SharePoint. So if you have authentication to SharePoint, you could actually access any document on the enterprise from the device, any one of the devices, whether it's Windows 8 or Windows Phone. SkyDrive and SkyDrive Pro. Okay, so the flexibility there for how you want to make information and data and documents available to users is up to you. Obviously, there's always room for some fun, right? So you can actually just switch over to looking at some family pictures as well on the same device. It's just consuming data from a different point. Instead of being the Sky Pro, which is for business, it's consuming it from your own SkyDrive account that is associated with your Live ID. What about security? So here's a kind of a snapshot. You have this whole notion of trustworthy hardware. So it's almost like I don't want to say this, but it's almost like the model for security design is absolute total paranoia. And that's a good thing. Because from the time you turn a device on, you have secure boot, you have cryptography protection at the hardware level. So you can prevent, hardware-based attacks. Then when you boot out the machine, you have trusted boot. The applications themselves have to go through a vetting process in order for them to be published on the store. Otherwise, they will be rejected. So a malicious app will never make it to a device because this has to cross the testing boundary. Then you have the sandboxing. So once your application is downloaded on the device, because of the capabilities that the developer specified for that app, it's going to create a secure boundary, a sandbox for execution. So that if your application said, oh, I need camera access, for instance, but you didn't specify internet access, in the extreme case that maybe your application got hijacked and the code was trying to access the internet, it won't. Because the actual sandbox itself has removed that capability completely, based on the fact that when the application got brought down and got installed, the OS did an analysis, capability analysis based on the application profile, and created then the runtime environment for it. We have real-time anti-phishing protection, and we also have that applies to IE8 with the secure browser. And then now we have data. The data is flowing through the internet. What do I do? Well, we have device encryption, which is total device encryption. For the case of a phone, for instance, is automatic. And you can't turn it off, it's just there. IRM, as I mentioned before. And you have the ability to enforce some of these encryption capabilities through policies. So you can see that all the way from the time you turn the power on to the time when you actually interacting with an app, consuming data from the internet, is end-to-end protection. And that's not surprising, haven't heard a single instance of security breach on any of our Windows Store infrastructure to this day. So we've done an excellent job there, and that should be a source of relief for anyone putting their reliance on this technology. So what about device management? I'm gonna do it on time. I wanna leave 5 minutes for questions if I can. So we basically have known about enterprise management for a very, very long time, right? But we know the reality. There's a proliferation of devices, form factors, applications. You don't have control over what people download, for instance. You also have this notion of people bringing their own devices and so on. The fragmentation that comes with trying to manage all that and the complexity of it. So many, many challenges that are faced by IT today if they want to allow that level of flexibility. Unfortunately, it's a force that you can't really fight. Eventually, I think these trends are going to win, and because it's part of making IT and enterprises more agile, whether they're government or not. So the enabling bring your own devices scenarios, right? Number one thing that I personally find pretty exciting is the Windows to Go. How many people know about Windows to Go? Okay, Windows to Go is the coolest thing ever. You basically provision a bootable USB with a version of Windows that you decide what goes in it, right? So now I can take that USB, plug it into my computer at home, my personal computer, boot from that USB, and I have enterprise stuff that I would have at work. I unplug that USB, there's no traces of anything to do with work in that machine whatsoever. So that's an amazing technology. I love it because it's so agile in terms of enabling me to do work, even if I'm in Honolulu and I'm just carrying my own laptop type of thing. Or for third-party vendors that are coming in, you don't want to mess with their own computer, so you give them a USB, you're going to boot up from this machine. At the end of the day, unplug it, and you're good to go. Unified device management. If you have a prolific kind of environment that mixing different platforms, we allow for that. This idea of having a virtual desktop is a very powerful one as well, where you can log on to a session, to a server that has basically an instance of my desktop. And I can just use it as if I was at work remotely. et cetera, et cetera. So there are many scenarios there, and the infrastructure, the Windows 8 infrastructure allows for that. So I was mentioning here, for instance, the System Center plays a key role in this. And you have two choices there because we have now a single console for management where you can rely on System Center for the typical stuff that we know about handling the PCs and tablets and so on. But also, you have Windows Intune, which is totally implemented on the cloud. So all the provisioning for the devices is done on the cloud. So you're always doing the management remotely. And this is something that you can actually rely on it directly for some devices or through Exchange Active Sync for like things like Android devices. But it actually allows you to handle WinRT, Windows Phone, iOS, Android, et cetera, right from the cloud. Or you will do your traditional stuff through the enterprise management. So I talked about Windows to Go. So these are the different scenarios you have. You have a contractor coming in, or you bring your device to work and you want to do use it for work-related things. Or you're traveling, or it's something where the computer is shared. So maybe there's nothing really on that machine except my own USB that I bring in, and everybody have their own to use the same kind of hardware, but the actual OS instance is different. So this is definitely an enabler for mobile professionals that I think is unique. And so these are all in terms of the desktop optimization pack. I'm not going to go too deep into it. But it allows you to leverage virtualization, both application virtualization or user experience virtualization, so that you can centralize some of the stuff, and you just have basically thing hardware sitting on the desktop, and the user can get to that endpoint either from internal or from outside in a secure way. But I'm not going to go deep into that because I'm not a MOP expert. All right. So what are the next steps in terms of embracing Windows 8? One is developing apps for the agency, both Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. As I mentioned, we have capability that allows you to optimize the code so that you can have code that is actually running on both devices, unchanged, and then you just account for the delta, both for the UI or for some of the specific things that are relevant to the application. This idea of enabling bring your device proactively, obviously, as you see that here, the level of capabilities, you have many choices for doing that don't challenge, what you already have, especially if you have a Microsoft enterprise management solution already in place. This idea, having the versatility of different devices, then you have you get to choose which one makes sense for your business, versus having to compromise because you have just one size-fits-all device that you have to scratch your hair about. What about this? What about security here? What about management here? And so on. So manageability is a relevant aspect of that, as well as security. I am personally more excited about the security model because it's end-to-end, and it's amazing how, for a new technology like this, so far there hasn't been any issues with security at all that you ever heard of. And it's because we're taking the whole thing from hardware all the way to the store to the actual sandbox itself. And so, what are the resources that are available to you guys? From our point of view, we have this program called App Builder Program. You basically sign up through this address, and you get guidance for 30 days from the design of the app all the way to the actual deployment of the app. If you need assistance in person, you get an 800 number you call to ask questions, maybe because you got stuck on something, and they're going to guide you through the whole process. This is a perfect opportunity to take an idea that you may have that is something that can benefit citizens, and actually leverage this program to do that. If you want to experiment with stuff, we have a 90-day trial for Windows Azure. It's full capable for 90 days, so that you can go in there, play with the Azure data marketplace. There's a lot of open government data there. In fact, we have one of the labs, we're running a lab from now until for the next 4 hours straight, in 1 hour each. And there's one lab there that through the whole process of consuming open data, government data. It's crime data that you can visualize on your Windows 8 device. So I encourage you to go and play around with that. Development tools, if you have it already, great. If not, you can actually download the Express version to play around with. And but if you have it, your enterprise has it, then you're good to go with MSDN. The SDK, we have a 90-day Windows 8 90-day trial. The 90 applies to Windows 8, not to the SDK. The SDK is just free download. So that's another place we can go in there and download the Windows 8, install it on your machine, play around with it, just do a dual boot so you don't compromise your machine in the sense that it may not be part of your policy at the time to run Windows 8 or whatnot. Just make it dual boot. And you also have training. So the Camp in a Box basically gives you end-to-end training for Windows 8, all the way from startup, from the beginning, to all the different scenarios that you can tackle. And so again, the 45 minutes doesn't do justice to the subject, but I wanted to give you kind of a broad view of the different aspects in terms of the integrated user experience, the capability, the opportunity for apps, manageability, and the cloud services, always connected, and the ability for you to be productive no matter where you are. Again, we have the labs on the other side, and it's going to be running for 4 hours. So if you guys come by, we can chat some more there, and you can play with the technology. We have devices there. We have devices downstairs, all kinds of devices that we brought with us. So go play with that and check it out. Thank you for coming.